Good afternoon. Thank you all so very much for joining us today. This is a specially called meeting for the Public Facilities Arts and Culture Committee. The purpose of today's meeting is to discuss Metro Arts and the grant funding process, to give us a little background of what has transpired throughout the budget season this year and over the summer, and bringing us to today. Our guest is Executive Director of Metro Arts, Daniel Singh. He's going to give us background, and I did want to say there are two people that are signed up for public comment, but I do know that there were some additional people that wanted to sign up. Did you want to speak by any chance? Ask any questions?
I do know someone who wants to speak. They're just not here yet.
Okay.
Is that okay?
We have space for 4 and only 2 are signed up, so we're going to go ahead and we'll help that individual when they get here.
All right, perfect.
Fantastic. And
do you mind if I record, like, for Instagram Live?
is that
That's
Director
fine.
Darby?
That's
Okay.
fine. The meeting is being recorded and streamed on Nashville.gov.
I was just
Or
wanting.
YouTube. It's actually going to be on YouTube.
Okay.
Okay.
I was just
Our YouTube
wanting to double check and make sure I can also get footage of that as well.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Fantastic. So we'll let Director Singh speak. We'll let Director Singh speak first. Once he is finished, I would like to allow council members to ask any questions. And once we are finished with asking questions, I will then move into our public comment time to be able to ask some questions as well. I think it's very important to get things on the record about processes. I think there's some clarification that is needed, and really that is the purpose of today, so we can demystify some of what is going around. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you, Director Singh.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson Stiles, I'm grateful to the council and everyone here. I appreciate your support for the arts. It means a lot that you all care so much about the arts. And our end goal, as always, is to hit our 1% of the combined budget. I'll keep reminding everyone that if we can get to that goal, it'll really lift up the artists and arts organizations in Nashville. Just wanted to give a quick background on myself for those of you who haven't met me yet. I'm a 25 veteran. I wish I was 25-year-old. A 25-year veteran in the arts. Have been in the dance community for a long time, but I've been in arts administration for about 6 or 7 years, most recently. I worked as an individual artist for many years. I've run a small nonprofit myself, and I've run multi-million-dollar theater organizations. So I get a feeling for the whole spectrum of the arts ecosystem, and I know that there's a lot going on right now. When I came to Nashville, I came with a vision of service and really lifting up what was happening in Nashville, amplifying the artists and arts organizations here already. And you know, what was really exciting for me was that Metro Arts had a Committee on Anti-Racism and Equity, right? Like, and that had started as far back as 2015. Most other arts agencies were starting that after the George Floyd murder and much later, but Metro Nashville was leading the country in that sense. So that was really exciting for me. And when I arrived, we saw a quick scan of what was happening and saw that there was a lot of inequity happening. You know, like I can give you a quick example. The Jubilee Singers, almost 160-year-old organization, gave the name to our city. I was thinking they would definitely be in a funding pool, and they have never been funded by Metro Arts. So those were like beginning indications of the disparities or inequities in our funding pool, right? Then there's a largest group of Kurdish immigrants in the country in Nashville, and I thought there would be a huge representation of that in our funding portfolio. Again, not really there in the evidence that was presented. So I was looking through that, and then I realized that we need to really do some work and move through this in a thoughtful with some method and not just trip into it quickly. So at that point, the CARE Committee and the Commission had a meeting in October. I got here end of July, moved to Nashville in September, and October 22nd, the CARE Committee, which is the Committee on Anti-Racism and Equity, and Commission had a joint meeting Chair Powell was there, and Chair Angelica, who just recently resigned, was there. And I was given a very clear equity mandate and an anti-racist mandate from both of them, saying that this is what the CARE Committee and the Commission is charging me to move forward with, and helped me start with that. And out of that, we started some grants editing processes. Our grants processes were pretty outdated, hadn't been revised in over 8 years. And there were also barriers for people entering the funding cycle there. So we started a first artist-led grants editing process. Till then, everything that was done by staff, so I wanted to bring the artists and arts organizations in to do that. So that was one thing we started doing. We launched our disparity study, which we can't quite call it a disparity study because we didn't meet the standard, and I'll explain more later. We also launched a comparison study to see where Metro Art stands with other peer cities at that time. So those were some of the actions that came out of that equity piece that I was charged with by CARE and the Commission. And at the same time, I wanted to give you like what I was dealing with in the department. There had been 4 EDs by the time I got there in a 2-year span in that department. And that department had gone through the pandemic, remote work. We were short 8 staff members, so we were working at 50% capacity. The public arts team had gone from 6 to just 2 full-time staff members at that point, and we were moving forward everything while we were so severely handicapped in the office. So that was what was happening in the office. And then in the Nashville larger climate, we looked at the number of arts nonprofits that were registered. In 2019, there were 350 arts nonprofits registered as of 2019 with IRS. We had only funded about 50 till then. The same 50 were coming back. And the Bureau of Labor estimates were about 15,000 for individual artists, and that was based on artists affiliated with large organizations that were counted in their 990s. So if you're an individual artist or if you're a writer or performer, the Bureau of Labor did not count those. So we estimate there are actually 22 to 25,000 artists in Nashville. Till last year, the highest number of individual artists we'd funded was 22. So again, 22,000 individual artists, we had funded about 22. So given all of those shifting dynamics here, I felt like we really needed to focus on equity because the needs were immense. And the data will bear itself out here. So we worked through with the artist-led panel to simplify the grants process. There were 15 questions in the grants, and whether you are a $25,000 budget organization or a $50 million organization, you had to answer all 15 questions. You're required to provide a lot of financials and audits and all of those things. So we simplified that down to 8 questions for large organizations with budgets over $500,000 and 3 questions for organizations with budgets under $500,000. With those changes, our operating grants went from 52 in the prior year to 88. And the number of BIPOC organizations in the general operating grants had been at the highest 3 in the previous years. We got them up to 10 in our grant cycles with the work we did. In the Thrive Project pipeline, we went from 22 applications to 175 applicants, 600% growth. And still like 600% growth, but in comparison to the 20,000 artists, like we're still barely scratching the surface there. Out of the Thrive applicants, 40% were BIPOC artists. Fully 60% were women. 105 out of the 175 applicants were women. So I can speak with pride in the work we've launched in our work moving in this direction, and so we're really excited about what we can do given that we were understaffed, given the challenges that we inherited. I was really, really excited about the work our staff, the commission, and the panels were doing. And then, so we arrived with that in July, and so based on those data points, staff recommended we prioritize Thrive, and we prioritize organizations under 500,000. We did consider BIPOC artists or service as one of the data points, but it was one of many data points. We looked at council districts, zip codes, whether the first-year applicants, budget size, all of those were considered, feasibility of the project, And the BIPOC category was never given to the panelists. It was just a impact study that we did. So no point in the scoring of the applications was the BIPOC factor used to influence the scoring of the artists. The other piece that seems to get glided over is that when you say 40% were BIPOC, what does that mean the other 60% were white artists, right? Like, so at no point were we leaving the white artists out of the equation, right? Like 60% of Thrive artists were white, and we wanted to just show what the impact was, right? So I would say that it was a very balanced analysis, and we made that recommendation to Commission in July, and the Commission in July voted for prioritizing Thrive and the organizations that had budgets under $500,000. In the meantime, in May, when we had rumblings of what the affirmative action rulings might look like, I had sent emails to commission and committee chairs, including the grants committee chairs, to say that this is coming down the pike. I just want to be ready for it, and you know, so the commission knew from May that affirmative action might be a concern come whenever the Supreme Court ruling is. And at no point did we say we have to change what we were doing. So I was not given any guidance at that point to change how we were looking at the grants and recommendations. However, in July, the fact that the affirmative action ruling might influence was brought up, despite the commission knowing as far back as May that I had asked, should we do something differently, and was told, no, go ahead. So anyway, so after the July vote, legal looked at everything that had happened and decided that the vote had to be rescinded and voted again. Staff disagreed with that decision, but you know, like, legal makes recommendations and the commission gets to decide how they want to do. And the commission took the vote in August, and they decided to hold the funding where it was in the prior year. It was, we had said, and I will say that I made a tactical mistake in saying that we will hold the funding at the same level as the previous years if we did not get enough funding from the mayor's office or from council. So we did not get enough funding. And so at that point, so in August, the council used that, the commission used that and said that we're going to move back to the funding that supported prior funders. But as I pointed out to you, the prior funding pool was not as diverse as we had made in the FY24 cycle. The other thing that happened was that we had gone through CARE Committee and our Commission's recommendations on advancing anti-racism and equity, and we had created a new framework. And so when you get new information, you have to take that new information into account. And we were looking at everything that was coming into our feed, and our strategic plan going back to 2015 also says that Thrive artists have to be prioritized, cultural equity has to be prioritized. So there were a lot of promises on the table, and I made a promise, yes, but there were other promises on the table. There was changing information on the table, and at that time we got the preliminary disparity study, and we can't still technically it's not a disparity study. And I'm going to explain why, because to complete a disparity study they needed 19 BIPOC arts organizations in our general operating funding pool. And the most we've had till last year was 3 or 4. And so statistically they couldn't do the power test to show that there's a factual predicate to then compare the BIPOC arts cohort with the non-BIPOC arts cohort. And because of that reason, the disparity study couldn't be completed. And the recommendations from those consultants were that the disparity is so huge that they couldn't even begin to do the study. That's how huge the disparity was. That's what our consultant said. But legal recommended that at that point that we need to rescind the vote. We need to do the disparity study through their process. They have a different firm they work with, and we're happy to do that work with them. In the meantime, we also heard from Michelle Lane, who did the procurement disparity study, that there is a framework in which we will be able to use the procurement disparity study if we put a call for services out in grants. So there's a lot of swirling information, right? Like, it's not like there's one piece of data that I can just use information on. I'm getting conflicting reports from peer agencies, peer directors, experts. The legal department itself was in disagreement. Tom Cross in legal agreed with Michelle Lane and said that yes, you can use procurement's disparity study if you put your calls out as artist services and not as grants. You can't use grants framework with procurement's disparity study because that was based for services. And then meanwhile, there were others in legal who were saying, no, you can't use it. So even within the legal department, there wasn't a consensus because it's an evolving information here. So a lot of this was swirling at this point. And then there was another technical piece that I take full responsibility for. The council will remember that there was a $2 million earmarked as a capital spending for organizations that had a physical property they owned or had a long-term lease on. And that was going to bypass the Metro Arts Commission and bypass council oversight. And so we worked with council to get it redirected to Metro Arts, and I'm very grateful to all of you for doing that work and helping us get that funding. But that came out of a new fund balance policy, first time in Metro Finance, right? So that again creates its own ripple of processes and contract changes and definitions. So now in hindsight, I realize that yes, we should have had 2 votes in July to begin with, one on the funding we had in hand and a separate one for when the fund policy balance actually gets updated and we might get the 2 million or we might get 1.8 or we might get 1.4 or nothing at all. We should have had a separate vote. So, but the hindsight is 2020, right? So again, I'm pointing out how much information is swirling at us and we're trying to make sense of it. I've been here barely 8 months at this point, so working through all of this information. And so we always have legal present in our commission meetings, and so someone hopefully, so it wasn't just me that didn't catch that, there were other people in the room who should have caught that as well. So we took the vote in July and August. We should have separated it out into 2 votes, one for the funding we have in hand and one based on the fund balance policy change, and we didn't do that, and that was a mistake. And but I think there's other folks who could have helped us and guided with, us out with that as well. The other piece I wanted to kind of point out is that the $2 million was directed towards large organizations that had buildings, right? Like, and so typically you know who owns buildings, and then if you own building, then it becomes its own way. You can fundraise, you raise money, and then you can come after capital grants. And so our goal was like, well, how do we create a pathway for artists who don't own buildings to also own buildings, right? Like grant guidelines say that you cannot own real property. You can't use grant money to own real property. So then if you don't have this entry already in, you can never get into that pipeline. So we were really thinking about all of those equity issues as we're moving forward. The other question I think that came up also was like why murals were not funded as part of our projects. I know that a lot of letters have been coming to the commission and to the council. When the percent fund was created, it was based on permanent public art. And this was in 1997 when council passed the percent fund ordinance. And at that time, mural technology was compared to now, I would say almost rudimentary. Murals did not last beyond a year because of sunlight and water and all of that. Since then, in the recent years, there's vinyl, there's parachute cloth, there's stenciling, a lot of techniques that let murals last from 10 to 20 years, well into the window of permanent art collection, right? Like we consider anything over 3 years to be permanent collections of our work. So I asked the Public Arts Committee to consider funding the murals from the percent fund. But there was a split with staff and Public Arts Committee at that point because, as I said, there were 2 out of 6 staff members in Public Arts, and they're like, we're drowning. We were given 2 or 3 additional projects from the mayor's office in the participatory budget cycle, and again with just 2 staff. 2 major projects were rerouted to us through the Public Arts participatory budget process. And so they said, given all that, we really don't think we can't take this on, 31 mural projects. And staff and I have a disagreement on this. I'm happy to have them come and air their concerns with you. They don't think percent fund should pay for mural arts, and I think mural arts have advanced to this stage where they can last 10 to 20 years. And I think we don't have to give all of the percent funds for mural arts, but we can say 1% of the percent fund can go to murals or something, right? Like there can be a compromise. And we just didn't have the time to work through all this because it was all coming at us at such high velocity at this moment. So that's one of the reasons why we talked about the murals. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, the delays in payments, right? Like I know you've been getting a lot of emails about that. In my conversation with Kevin Crumbo on November 30th, I welcomed any clarification in our processes, anything we can do, and since then he has started the audit, and I look forward to the audit because the audit process is here to help us do our job better. So if you did something that caused us to slow down and they can help us make it faster for the artists, that is what I want to do. That's what my job is. So I'm really excited about the audit process, but I have a timeline that I've asked our directors to type up for us. So I'll share this with the council. Sorry, if you can pass that around. So you'll see that when the commission voted in August, we sent grants contract clarification question to legal and said we have two separate pots of funding, one that's coming in, one that's available now and one that won't be available till later. What should we do? Do you want us to do it as two installments, one that's payable now and one in February? Do we want us to do two separate contracts? What do you recommend? And now again in retrospect I realize that I should have looped in finance in this question because finance had a new fund balance policy that everyone was working through, right? So this is a new technical mistake. I take ownership for that. Going forward I know we need to do that. At that point our process was to only check with legal, and we did. We sent that email. You see that exact language there. Legal told us to do it as two installments, one payable in the fall and one payable in February once the mid-year allocations were made. So we followed legal guidance, and on September 6th, we started putting out 11th of September we gave the contracts. And then October 4th, Metro Finance asked us to show our spreadsheet of allocations against our contracts, and on the 17th, Finance actually said that they will not sign it. They want us to split it up into two different contracts, one for the money we have in hand and a separate contract for the money that's from the new fund balance policy. Fine, right? Like we're learning new information, so we're rolling with the punches. We got the new contract on November 7th from legal. Metro Finance approved it on the 8th. By the 13th through the 17th, we distributed the contracts. There were 88 contracts we had to distribute. So it's not like something we can just press a button and shoot it out. And they require 8 signatures. We have to put it into a DocuSign workflow so that all of the right people see it at the right time. So November 27th through the 30th, we got all the contracts back. And then as of today, 52 contracts were at the clerk's office at 1 a.m. when I typed this up, but by 4 p.m. all of them were released. So all of the contracts are ready to be invoiced and they'll be ready to be paid in the next 30 days. And so that's the delay in the contract piece that I wanted to address. So that's a technical snafu. We know what the fixes are. We're going to be working with legal and finance, take full responsibility for it. I apologize to the artists, arts organizations that have been delayed in this process, and we know better going forward. But I think the second piece of thing that's been paralleling us during this time is that one of the reasons we were asked to rescind the July vote was that there is a threat of a lawsuit because we had used BIPOC as one of the criteria in deciding to prioritize Thrive and organizations under 500,000, which were predominantly women and minorities, right? And so we were told that could open us up to a lawsuit. But every decision has a lawsuit potential. Every decision has a risk, not just one direction, right? The other direction also has a potential lawsuit. And so we took it out. And here's a narrative struggle here. We took the BIPOC justification out, and then the vote went the other way against staff recommendation. The artists have filed a complaint with MHRC at this point because they feel that not taking that into consideration is discriminatory. And so at that point, that's in Reverend Tucker's lane, and I'll let him address where that is. And so I just wanted to like walk through all of that, and once again take the time to thank all of you. This is complex work, for lack of a better word, and the fact that council and the mayor's office funded and stood up a diversity office speaks to the need for this work to continue doing, right? Like, and Andrea Blackman's doing it in her office, but every agency has to do its own work, and we are trying to do our work. We will make mistakes. Metro Arts has been in the forefront of equity work. Before any other agency in the country, we had an anti-racism statement in 2015. And before any other agency has started moving in anti-racist and equitable place, we are doing it. And we're making mistakes as we go because we are the first person prototyping all of these steps. But I say that 51 other agencies stand to benefit from our mistakes, right? Like someone has to make the mistake. We're making it. I'm apologizing. I'm willing to take responsibility. But this is really helping all of Metro to learn. And so with that, I'll stop. And I don't know if you want to add anything about your process with the investigation, or you want to ask questions, or however you want to move this forward.
Well, I'll just answer some questions if you have some.
If you could introduce yourself, since you came in a little bit later, Reverend Tucker.
Sorry for being late, Chairperson Stiles. My name's David Tucker. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Relations Commission.
Thank you very much. And so to what Director Singh just mentioned, can you speak a little bit about the complaint that's going on?
Yes, we received a Title VI complaint. Apparently, individuals were sent award letters that ended up resulting in them receiving half of what they were going to get, and hence they're grieving about it. We're still involved in our fact-finding. I have Ashley here with me in case you want some exact numbers, but we have interviewed several commissioners, employees, complainants, viewed hundreds, I won't say hundreds, several hours of commission tape and minutes as we move through this process. And what it's turning into is ultimately we'll issue two reports. One will be in regard to the Title VI complaint itself, and the other one will be a much larger what we discovered in this process. And it appears to be a bit unfortunate that all of this seems to be falling on this executive director who, we don't provide onboarding. This man came here from Washington, D.C. No one told him how all of this over here works. He came here with a mission to bring diversity and inclusion. And I think what the overall report will show is the reluctance of change. What was originally passed would have began to redirect how monies have always flowed. 90% of roughly 50 million that has come through here since '89 have gone to organizations of over $500,000. So you know who those organizations are, and I don't think that they willingly want to give this up. To his point of under the threat of a lawsuit, think about this, and we're asking legal for some answer to about 9 questions now, and we're waiting on those answers. But inside of one of those 9 questions is, who would the threat of a lawsuit come from if you're including people who have not been funded? So secondly, the question becomes, who would the threat of a lawsuit come from? And the place where that threat comes from, would they even have standing? But it's not BIPOCs who are complaining about this. Let's be clear. It's not BIPOC organizations. It's the organizations who've been receiving the lion's share of the funding. So my question would be, if they would, are they the ones who are threatening the lawsuit. And so legally, I'd like to know, do they have standing for that? So we're waiting to get answers to some of those questions. Also, what we've very interested in, potential for conflicts of interest that reside on certain boards and commissions. So we're trying to do our fact-finding as best as possible. But right now, I think there's 7 openings on the commission of 15. When all this came up, you see that you had 2 chairs to step down, almost back to back. You've had multiple commissioners leave in the wake of this. So the questions for us is, why'd you leave? Was it attributed to this? And if it was, why and how come? So we're still in the midst of putting together what will be ultimately 2 reports.
Thank you very much. I would like to hear from Ms., I don't know, thank you, I don't want to mispronounce your last name. I'm just going to go with Ms. Ashley. Could you give us some of the stats that Director Tucker just mentioned?
Of like who we're speaking with. Yeah, we put requests to all the commissioners that were serving in June, July, August, really at sort of the peak of the vote process. So it was the 15 at the time. We've interviewed, as of today, 10 of them. We have 1 more scheduled tomorrow, 2 scheduled in January, 1 that we're having trouble getting in touch with, and 1 who has referred us to Metro Legal. We've talked to 3 of the complainants to like really talk in depth about their experience and their thoughts about what's happened. And we've done 2 formal interviews with staff members, both Daniel and the grants manager. And that's the list. So I think that's what, 15, 17, about 20 people that we've had requests out to so far.
And if I may, the individuals that you spoke with, you mentioned that 1 has referred you to Metro Legal, and Director Tucker, you mentioned conflicts of interest. What are the conflicts of interest that you've come up upon?
Well, I said potential.
Potential. Forgive me.
I
What
said
are the potential conflicts of interest that you run into?
Maybe association with some of the large arts organizations, and also being on the commission. We have also analyzed the pre-vote, the vote in the vote in June, and the vote in July, to just record how people voted in both instances. And just one, there's several, but one particularly that jumps into my mind is 1 person votes nay to all of the scenarios of the smaller groups, and then abstains from the vote on large groups. Now, that's interesting in that if you abstain from because there's a conflict, because you abstain from the large groups, but you use your vote to vote no for the disbursement of funds for all the smaller groups. So just things like that, trying to see what has happened and try to create a clear picture, because we just want to, at the end of the day, we want to publish this report. I've had conversations with Metro Legal in regard to potential trainings for commissions. Commissions are supposed to run by Robert's Rules of Order, so if a person becomes chair and they have no experience, then meetings can get out of order when people bring up conversations that are not even on the agenda and spend 45 minutes talking about them. When the chair is not well informed of what it means to be chair and what your duties are, and then when you have a person from legal that's there to give you advice, it may be helpful if that person could kind of be the parliamentarian in the room. That could be helpful to a chair of who may not be comfortable. So those are just some of the things that I think may be generally helpful for boards and commissions as a whole.
Councilmember Gadd, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just on the, first of all, thank you. Thank you, Reverend Tucker. Thank you, Director Singh. Thank you so much, Ashley, for being here. Thank you, Chair, for calling the meeting. A couple of questions, but I want to pull back and say, I just have one question for Reverend Tucker. But other questions more on process stuff, so I want to make sure, give everybody an opportunity to kind of dive in. But on the, just for my notes, there were 85 people who were complainants?
No.
Is that why? I'm just trying to
No,
understand.
no, no,
how many
no.
individuals?
What is it, 5, 6?
We have right now 3 people who have filed complaints with their name
Okay.
at the top of the line. They've included letters of support from other artists who feel impacted by this, but those are not individuals who want to
Okay.
put their name on and go through this process, which takes
So-
time and,
okay.
you know,
So it's 3 complainants
3 complainants.
and there's Thrive recipients.
Correct.
Okay. So, thank you. I just want to make sure I understood. So one of the reports is going to be regarding those 3 complainants, and then the other one, it sounds like you're probably down the road a little bit on the second report of what you're thinking of what the conclusions or what the will be. So so that's the second report. And do you know a timing on when you may have those?
We were just talking about that today. We're going to try to have something to our commission on the 19th, is that what we said, of January.
Okay.
And then hopefully shortly thereafter. We're really waiting on answers from Metro Legal that would clear up, or at least allow them to take a position, because one of the concerns that MHRC has is the broader, larger impact. If that is the interpretation of the impact of the Supreme Court ruling, it has, if it affected arts, what other departments and what other processes is it going to affect? And we need to hear that, and folks need to know that.
And one of the parts for that, I'm thinking of as 2 reports. On the second report of an overall analysis, is it going to be specific to the Arts Commission or in general to all boards and commissions, kind of addressing like how we do train or any recommendations for better preparing commission members of these are the rules and how to do Robert's Rules.
Yes, there will be those type things, and fortunately,
So it's not just the Arts Commission you're looking at; it's going to be a broader as well.
we're going to make a statement around this whole process and this whole function. And as we've said before, DEI is one of those sexy words that I compare it with LEED certification. You can get a baseline LEED certification that really don't mean anything, and that same thing applies to DEI. But it always does a couple things. It's always disruptive, and it always shifts power. If you do it anywhere on anything, those are the outcomes. And what happens is when the power and the emphasis starts to shift, that system responds. Again, I'm just talking about it from a systemic sense that has nothing to do with personalities. It's that this thing is geared to operate this way, and it operates its most efficient this way. So when you go to disrupt it, there's already momentum to resist the change. And that's what happens when you try to do this work, particularly for organizations who have never participated in the funds that the city has allocated.
Councilmember, did you?
Yeah, well, I've got
keep going.
follow-up questions, but I can defer.
It's
Are they all
just a
within the
quick
same?
question that follows up to.
Go ahead and follow
exactly
up,
what
and
you
I'll
just-
jump back over. Yeah.
Thank you. Sandy Ewing, I'm District 34. Thank you for being here. I wanted to just address what you just said, that change is hard. It's true, and it usually does generate a lot of angst and resistance. It can. So my question pertains to that. I'm wondering how much socialization of this idea was done, how many meetings were held with a wide variety of potential recipients, what kind of discussions were had with both large and small potential recipients so that they could understand what was coming.
So we had multiple listening sessions before we did this process, and all of them were really focused on moving in this direction towards anti-racism and equity. And all of them said that, and they have statements on that. But I think I take a slightly different approach to change is hard. I think change is not hard if you're going to gain, but change is hard if you're going to lose something. Right? So it's more that loss is hard than change is hard, because and what we were trying to do was to like minimize the pain on the most vulnerable of our applicants, right? Like, so everyone was going to feel the pain. Even the artists in the original scenario in July's vote getting the $20,000, which they asked for, if they put all of that money towards their artwork, which is what they were supposed to do, they couldn't use it for anything but artwork. Can you tell me how you can live in Nashville on $20,000 with a family of 4? Not easy, right? So even the artists in July getting the $20,000 were not getting what they needed. If they were still in pain, right? And so people often talk about the potential harm of a large organization that had planned a budget, but they have boards, they have donors, and they have been using this as a way to fundraise. Like, you probably have received Giving Tuesday a call saying we haven't received funding from Metro Arts yet, please give us, right? So they have that bandwidth and the network to go and fundraise. So I think we socialize the idea, and I will counter or like add to what you said and say, you know, the disability community has been asking for access for 40-some years. And the able community just sat back and said, oh, that's too hard, that's too hard, that's too hard. COVID happened and it affected the able community. We figured out how to get laptops out. We figured out how to work remotely. We figured out how to get people whatever access they needed because it was affecting the able community. My focus is on the scores of artists who have been blocked out of Metro Arts funding. Like I said, Jubilee Singers have not been funded once by Metro Arts. 160-year-old institution that gave the name to our city has not been funded by Metro Arts. If that's not inequity and if that's not a problem, I don't know what is. So maybe it was fast, but right now we're assuming that not doing anything is neutral. I think not doing anything is much more harmful than moving fast because there's violence happening to BIPOC artists and arts organizations, tremendous violence. And to assume that we are neutral and that if we slow it down, is kind of a DEIA approach. The anti-racist approach is to acknowledge the violence that's happening right now and to say how can we get to the people who are hurting the most as quickly as we can, like we did around COVID, like Metro did around COVID. And all of those thinkers put the hats on and figured it out, right? Like, I didn't get that support. I could have had legal and finance and everyone else supporting me in this process to move equity fast. Right, like, so I'm just like looking at it from a different perspective, and I think it's been socialized for 40 years. If you consider disability right, if you consider abolition of slavery, it's been socialized for hundreds of years. If you consider the founding of the nation, even longer. So it's been socialized in our community for many years. I don't need one more reason to slow it down. I'm looking at the people who are bleeding, and I'm in a triage mode right now.
Well, to be clear, I wasn't talking about socializing of DEI particularly. I was talking about socializing of just the idea of making this shift. That's all. I wasn't throwing shade at DEI.
Sure, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be sound as defensive as I did, but I'm passionate about this work, and yeah. No, they heard it many times. Yeah.
Does anyone else have a question besides Councilmember Gadd before we come back to you? Okay, in that case, if you want to continue, please.
Thank you, and thank you for that response. Yeah, I know. I'm sure with this work, it's very hard not to feel very, very passionate and personal. So completely understand that, and thank you, Council Member Ewing, for your question. So just kind of going back to some of the just the timeline. I think you already answered this in some of your statements, or where we see some of the the contracts for organization, so kind of going back to, sounds like some things are gonna be out the door, so
They're
that's
gonna be
one.
out the door, like I feel like the storm is passing.
Yeah, yeah, so let,
In 30 days, they'll have the
Okay.
payment.
So, will they, so the contracts, organizations sign for the operating grants that promised, I think, had the 50% promise.
So the original contract they signed had
Of what they were originally.
100% with one installment in the fall and one in the spring.
Okay,
But finance said, no, there has to be a specific language there, and that we have to split it into 2 contracts. And so we had to revoke those contracts and issue new contracts in November. And in that, they only got the 50% of the funding we have in hand. And once we get the mid-year allocation, we'll issue a new contract with that specific language, and they'll get that remainder of the funding.
okay, so so then they will get that 50% will be awarded in that second contract at the,
Provided that the fund balance policy gives us the whole 2 million. If it's smaller, then there'll be a proportional
Change in what the
change.
reward is.
And there's also the MHRC investigation going on. I don't know what their recommendation is going to be, so
will the MHRC recommendation possibly change the award of the second 50% that was promised?
You know, our recommendations have no strength. So, we're gonna give our
That may not be
best.
true, which is good,
We're gonna
right?
give our best, and we're gonna try to be as objective as we can, but at the end of the day, the decision to change those won't be MHRC's. But I also like for you all to remember that, before he got here, arts had been struggling for years.
What is a historically
So,
underfunded
yeah, he
initiative?
came into a dumpster fire.
well, there was
He didn't
historical,
start
the historical underfunding, but they had 4 ED transitions in 2 years, and half the staff had left under allegations of racism, and so I just asked that, you know, at that point, the previous EDs, when I had honest conversations with Chair Powell and others, and they said it's a systemic issue, it was not one person's fault, and I'm saying that it's the same thing now. It's a systemic thing. It's not. I take responsibility for all of my mistakes, but there are larger things at play here, and the department has been struggling for a long time. Underfunded for grants, but understaffed, and not on the priority list for a lot of other things. Yeah.
I know, it'd be exciting to think outside the box on additional funding opportunities. Do you mind if I?
One more, and then I'm going to go to Councilmember
Oh,
Vo.
I've got a couple.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Councilmember Vo.
Well, can I ask the questions just on the contracts that he's
Sure.
lifted up? So I just wanna kind of follow through. So I think, and you may have also addressed this, as of, I think it was late November on the 29th, or the 27th through the 30th on the timeline.
Yeah.
It looks like at that point, we had about, I think, 22 of the 75 contracts that had gone to the finance director is what was lifted to me, but there's about 53 others that still need to go over there.
Yeah, they're
So
all signed.
They're all over there,
They're
and
all
then they're gonna be,
signed, yeah.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like money's coming soon, so that'll be a happy time for a lot of folks, as you kind of give that, so congratulations, I know it's been a lot of work to move that through. I think would be also helpful, just for me is like the statement that we read, that would be really helpful to, if you're able to give that to the chair, it'd be helpful for just empowering me of like in the future of like being able to reference, in any org chart, like internal org chart with, you know, in-house or staff,
Metro Arts or
Metro Arts,
okay, or I can get you the org chart and
yeah, org chart and just the statement from today.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful. The written statement he was reading today
Oh,
would be
okay.
helpful.
What statement is she talking?
No, the one he presented at the beginning. I think that would be
Gotcha.
really helpful.
Okay. Of a timeline. You're referring to the
No,
timeline he wrote down?
just
Or-
what he just went over today.
Okay.
It
You
was
would like a
written as-
typed version of what he just vocalized?
Well,
Got
just
it.
what he was reading. I mean, you don't have to
Okay.
recreate anything, but I think
Okay.
that would be helpful. It looks like, you know, you had a reference point.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
If you could email that
Yes.
to me and I can
I will.
distribute.
have Rosie distribute to the rest
Yeah.
of.
It's a
of
little
the
bit
committee.
of hand scribble notes, but I will get it to you as soon as I can.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Vogt?
Great, thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, everyone. So I received various questions from community members. So I did want to clarify and just give the opportunity to set the record straight. So one question was, Director Singh, did you write any part of the complaint that was submitted by the artist to MHRC?
I have not even seen any of the statements. I have no idea what they are. I've been told by legal I couldn't talk to anyone at MHRC. So I have no idea what the statements say.
Great, thank you. And then another question was, for the grant process and of course in the future, how does Metro Arts plan to balance the needs of organizations and independent artists alike? I know you shared so much of your mission, but just to let people know specifically, any ideas and, in your mind, what does a healthy arts ecosystem, include and what does that look like?
I would say that the 1% funding that we've been asking for of the council and the mayor would be a very healthy arts ecosystem. Then I wouldn't be put in a position, or the Arts Commission wouldn't be put in a position of having to choose between organizations or artists, right? And so that's my thing, is I don't want to pick between them. I got into arts as a ballet dancer. I took a ballet class as a computer science major. It changed my life, and I switched to dance, right? And so I believe in all the wonderful range of rich arts that we have in Nashville, but it's up to you all to fund it.
Thank you so much for that. And then just in closing, just going over the details, like you said, so 88 contracts, and then we see here with the timeline from today, this is 75. So can you explain where the other 13 contracts are? I think if I missed that, sorry, but I just want to clarify.
I will have to check with my staff. I'm sorry, I did not do the map.
It's okay.
I was adding, I just got the notes, so I will check with my staff and I'll
Thank you.
clarify.
Yeah, I just want to clarify where the other 13 organizations are.
Yes, I will definitely check on that and get back to you.
Does anyone else have any other questions? Because I have a few. Okay. My first question, Director Tucker, can you provide us with the 9 questions? Are we able to see those 9 questions that you have asked of legal?
Yes, I can send those to you, yes.
Thank you very much. And Director Singh, when the vote first took place this summer, was your legal representation in the room
Yes.
the time that this took place?
Yes.
And who is the Metro Arts legal representative?
Tessa Ortiz.
Tessa Ortiz. Okay, and so the vote went through fine the first time. Was anything mentioned at that time by Ms. Ortiz as a potential issue because the
No, she said any decision has a potential for risk, and that's all the guidance we got.
okay
In
and
the July meeting.
in the first round of
Vote,
voting
yeah.
that took place, and then how did it transpire that a new vote had to be had? Who communicated with legal how the first vote went, and suddenly there was a communication that the vote had to be redone? How did that come about?
I don't know who called legal. I did not, so I'm guessing someone from the commission or one of the arts organizations might have called the commission or council and started that inquiry process, but we didn't start it at Metro Arts. Staff did not start it.
Okay, and Ms. Ortiz didn't not inform you that she had gone back
Concerns
to
or-
legal
yeah.
and they had instructed her?
I've heard that they've received call from council members to look at the commission decision.
Okay.
And not the current council, obviously. This was in July, it was the previous council.
Okay. So, you were given the impression that previous council members had reached out in regards to the decision, and that's what led Metro Legal to
To
then
review the
look
July
at the
meeting,
July
yeah.
meeting, okay. Prior to the audit that was just recently requested, had you spoken to the mayor's office
About,
about what was ongoing, as this has been very public for
Yeah.
several months now?
yes.
Had you had a conversation with the mayor's
I report to
office?
Kristen Wilson, and she's been kept abreast about what's happening.
Okay. And I believe I have a couple more, but thank you very much.
Of course.
as you went into the grants process, as you explained to us, there was a lot happening that was fast and furious. Our voting on the additional funding that we gave you, that was a first-time funding. When you went into the process, did anyone share with you that this being a new process, this is how it was supposed to go? Were there any instructions given from Metro Legal, from anyone, to
Or
guide you on
finance?
this
No,
process?
I mean, I think it should have come from finance because they set the new fund balance policy, and I didn't receive any guidance. I don't know, there might be other departments that are affected by the fund balance. It would have been nice to have received guidance centrally for that.
Okay. And is that in process now, as you've gone through the fire of
Now,
not
now we
having
know.
instructions?
Yes, now we will
Okay.
always check with legal and finance on contracts. Yes.
Excellent. And I know that our goal today is really to just put everything on the record
Yes.
so the public is aware of how this process went,
Yeah.
where things got hemmed up and how they got hemmed up. For a while, there was no communication from you to the artists, and I think that's the silence made people feel that there was something going on.
May I respond?
I would love for you to
Yeah,
respond,
I was told
please.
not to communicate during the investigation by legal and to refer all communications to legal, and so that's why we were not responding. We have canned messages that we're allowed to put out, and that's what we're doing. During the investigations, I don't want to get in the way of what's happening, and so that's why.
Okay, so that was not just in communicating with MHRC, but that was communicating, period?
With
that
press,
you were
I was
not
I
to have-
still am not allowed to talk to press.
Okay,
And we just got access to him less than 2 weeks ago. We were told that we were not to speak to the executive director or the chair until we were cleared by Metro Legal to speak to them, and that happened within the last 2 weeks. So we immediately scheduled time to talk to both of them.
okay, so that's the silence, it's not from you, it was being, you were
Directed.
being
I was
directed
being directed.
by legal to be silent, so,
Correct.
no malfeasance. Yes, Councilmember
Can I
Gadd.
ask just on that question, because we are getting a lot of feedback on that particular, that question. When did they when did they, as being legal, Metro Legal, ask you to stop speaking to folks? Was that recent?
Not talking to folks, to press,
to the press.
you know, and so as soon as the complaint was filed, we started getting interview requests from newspapers as far out as New York, and I was told from then not to engage with the press because you don't know what they will start the interview with and where it might go, and so I.
So that was probably as recent as, and I apologize.
That was, I don't, was
For
it
the
October?
timing.
When was it filed? When was the complaint filed?
Mid-October.
Okay,
Mid-October.
So you were advised in mid-October to not, but prior to that, you weren't advised?
Correct.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's mid-October until
No.
now,
Yeah.
okay, thank you for that clarification. And that just included press, but not artists, individual artists or organizations?
But if artists were asking questions related to these topics, then I couldn't comment on it.
Okay.
And so that was the hard part because often it would start in one place but try to edge into the area that I'm not supposed to respond, so it's hard to walk that line.
And
when-
organizations as well, and
Yeah,
applicants?
organizations as well, and it's hard to walk that line when we don't know, and we didn't know till October 17th that finance was gonna ask us to do 2 contracts. As soon as we found out, we let people know. So even after the complaint was filed, things were changing, right? Like, and we didn't get the final contract till November 7th from legal, and it was November 8th when finance approved the contract. So till like a month ago, we didn't have information. It was changing every day, every week.
And as of today, are you now able to speak
No,
towards any of this?
I am not
Okay.
allowed to speak with the press.
Well, then, we're really glad that you did come here today, so we could get all of this cleared up. We can direct people to this meeting to watch and get some information. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what your report findings are, and definitely would love to have you both come back to our committee once the report findings are done. Before we move into questions from our guests, I have one question, which is, do we have any arts commissioners here with us today? Hello, sir, and what is your name?
Little cheek.
Will Cheek. Nice to meet you. My question would be, earlier there was a mention of conflicts of interests and asking if people are sitting on boards of larger organizations and also sitting on the Arts Commission. Is that a conflict of interest for you that you've run into at all?
I think arts commissioners, by and large, are involved in the arts community, and whether they know artists, collect art, perform, or in my instance, I serve on boards. We all have interest in the arts in one way or another, and that's part of what we bring to the community. So when we have a vote that impacts something that an arts commissioner personally participates in, they recuse themselves. That's been the policy, and that's what Metro Legal's told us to do.
Gotcha. And do you serve on any of the boards that have filed any of the complaints, I guess, or concerns of not getting any funding?
I don't know any of the artists that have complained.
I'm sorry, I might have worded that incorrectly, but the larger organizations that have been getting the lion's share of funding, I guess that's Nashville Ballet, TPAC, along those lines. Are you affiliated on the board of any of those organizations?
I act as legal counsel to a number of nonprofits, and yes. So I have given legal advice on a pro bono basis, not paid to a lot of nonprofits.
Of
and
the
a lot
arts
and a lot of
nonprofits.
arts groups, yes.
Okay.
From the Nashville Children's Theater to, I don't know, a bunch of them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Can I add one comment?
Yes, Director
We
Singh.
don't have any artist representation on the commission. And that's something I would really like to close the gap on, since we have 7 new openings right now. And since the commissioners are required to recuse themselves from anything that's a conflict of interest, I think there is a way in which legal can help us figure out how to have artists on the commission while also being able to move forward as artists. I think there is a way to do this. Universities have figured this out. The tenure process requires professors to be publishing and researching and practicing while also sitting on committees, right? So there is a path for this, and so I would love to address that gap and make sure we get some artist voices on our commission.
Okay. And one more. How do you anticipate moving forward, Director Singh, in terms of building trust with all the organizations, the large ones as well as BIPOC? What does that look like?
So I think it again comes back to that bigger ask, right? Like right now we've been fighting for crumbs that are falling off the table. And if the council and the mayor's office gives us what really we need for Music City, for Athens of the South, and really holds up arts and culture where it needs to be, then I think that will be the beginning of the trust building. We can do listening sessions, we can talk to people, but what they're looking at is, can they keep the lights on? Can they make the rent payment? Can they get the studio rental they need? And that can only happen with money, and I think we have to prioritize and live up to our name of Music City and support the artists and arts organization. That is going to be the first step for us to build any trust in the community.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Director Tucker. Thank you, Mr. Sheik, for coming as Commissioner. At this time, I have 2 people that signed up, but I also saw some people come in. So I'm going to start with Michelle Flynn.
I am just a community member, and I want to thank Daniel very much. You know, having heard from artists about them just not knowing what's going on, and also, you know, it's the end of the year, and I understand that the grant cycle has changed, so folks are now, over the holiday, having to write grants. At the same time, they're not sure they're going to be getting more funding. And I think particularly the smaller organizations and individual artists, just this lack of knowing is been very challenging, I would say. And I don't, from what you've said today, I think it's so unfortunate that I'm going to say once again, I'm just going to say once again, as a public citizen, Metro Legal has stepped into something that has caused havoc. There are times when Metro Legal has chosen not to do things on the part of, like the Community Oversight Board, and standing up for it to the state. And now Metro Legal, I feel like, has stepped into this and sort of created I don't know what you want to call this, it's kind of a mess. And, particularly where you have a new commitment to diversity that this group is trying to undertake, I think all the artists and all the citizens in this community really want this to happen. I don't think anyone would say, no, this is a bad way to go. I think people are saying, yes, this is a good way to go, but it is challenging when you have a part of the government of the city that under the guise of this might not be legal because of this federal Supreme Court case, I understand that they have a responsibility to advise, but I feel like it's gone beyond advice. It feels like it moves into hampering some critical movement in the direction that the city wants to go. And whether it's fear that the state will come down on the city, or whether it's a fear that some federal entity is going to come down, I think this is a time where the city has to continue to be courageous and step forward. So that's probably the thing that that may sound very controversial, it's not about individuals. It's really about, I think you all were speaking to this, it's about a system that has been in place, a system that people are trying to shift, and lawyers, bless their hearts, my husband's a lawyer, they have their sphere within which they work, and they are advisors, and I think everyone has to listen to them, but also it cannot be the thing that determines what happens. This city has to follow through on its values, and then you deal with where the chips fall. I just think that has to be the way. And I feel like as a citizen, I want to apologize to you for Daniel, because, whether you had all the skills to undertake all of this in this moment in time, I think directors of nonprofits, having been there, you walk into developing a set of skills to meet whatever's coming down the pike. I think there's those things both go together. So I apologize that you have had to move into something where it's for any person with a tremendous amount of skills may just really have been challenged. And I also think, I'm a great believer in, and this is my last statement, I'm a great believer in that Chinese diagram, that where there's incredible crisis, there's incredible opportunity. And I think the complaint that's come Reverend, into your office, I think it's so important that listening is critical, communication is so important, and there are so many artists right there. The holidays about to be at the end of the year, people are trying to make their budgets. I think the communication, whether it comes from the mayor, whether it comes from the council, however it can come, because Daniel's been hamstringed now, and he can't communicate with the very people who are needing answers right now about how things are going forward. And I leave here still a bit confused, so I would offer you, I'm not dense, but I think that this is very complicated. And I appreciate the council for really calling this forward today, and to really struggle with how can we get resources out. I said that was the last thing. I was going to say one more thing, which is I've been a mediator for a number of years now, and what the mediator speaks to is, what is the third way? There's you do this, you do that, and a lot of times we get caught in this. It has to be this way or that way, and where there is money, there may be a way not to do everything, but to do a part of things. So it feels like you're meeting a commitment where you may not have been able to meet the commitment all the way while you're shifting into a new direction. I'm not saying I have an answer for that, but I think that there's a third way to approach some of what's going on. So thank you for your time.
I appreciate all of your comments. I think, you made some good points for us to take with us as we have some pondering to do. The next individual is Commissioner Cheek.
I was just here to thank.
2 minutes.
I was just here to thank you guys for funding arts and just to make sure I'm supporting the Arts Commission. So that's my only role. I'm chair of the Advocacy Committee. My personal goal is to see that the city increases arts funding so that we can fully fund diverse organizations and make sure that arts groups and arts individuals get the funding that they need. I think we can do a whole lot towards equity if we fully fund arts. We're really hoping that we can get more money this year, and that when we come back and we visit with you guys, our report is a lot more about what we're doing for the arts community and less about who we're funding and not funding. So I'm here for Arts for All. That's organizations, individuals. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Cheek. There were some people that came in that didn't get a chance to sign up. What is your name, ma'am?
Molly Secor.
Hello, Molly Secor.
Hi.
2 minutes, please.
It's not gonna take me 2 minutes. I'm a filmmaker. I've done a lot of fundraising for my projects over the years, and so I know the pain of trying to disseminate funds and communication is key. But I just want to say to one of Daniel's last things that he said was, you know, what could he do to help build trust? And I want to underscore that funding the arts, it is, you know, it sounds, we say it a lot, we hear it all the time. Yes, it's really important to us. Well, we need to demonstrate that it's really, really important to us. Cities like Chicago, you put up a building in Chicago, you've got to give money to the arts. There has to be public art, and there's a fund where it goes into the arts. There is no reason, and it's like not even 1%. Even if it was 0.5%, there are ways to do this so that we bring someone in who came into a train wreck and then said, here, we've got to fix this problem, and does not have the resources, the backing, and I want to, sort of reiterate what Michelle said. I think we have to look at legal for the same reasons that Michelle said. There are some issues here, and I believe those are worth looking at very seriously. But funding the arts, and there's a way to do that, and I don't know how we convince, we are a city that has got more skyscrapers going up and more, you look around here, it's ridiculous to think that we can't find a way to have arts funded by all the building and development in this city.
Thank you very much, Ms. Secor. Would you want to speak as well?
Sure. My name is Lydia Yusuf. I'm the director of In Mahabba Center. For the first time, we have applied for Thrive funding and we got defunded because of the decision of the commission and Metro Legal's intervention. So I just want to share my story because we're talking about a lot of logistics and there's a human impact to this, to the constituents that you all serve. I found out about Metro Arts in 2019 after a friend was interning at the newly elected John Cooper's office, had notified me that Metro Arts staff had forwarded him at the mayor's office a list of only white men for the inauguration party. My friend was asking about why BIPOC artists were not on the list. This is 2019. And specifically why Arabs in my community were not on that list. From there, I've had a tumultuous relationship with Metro Arts from 2019 when I found out about it, and I'm a lifelong resident here in Nashville, to 2002. I heard white people leading small organizations that receive general funding from Metro Arts advocate for getting $40,000, $50,000 in general funds, and that would be considered equity for them. Someone who had never received funding, someone who had never seen an Arab artist in Nashville, despite tens of thousands of our community members being here. And all I could think in this room was, what about my people? And what about the Latinx community members? And what about our Somali and Ethiopian community members? What about our people who built Music City Center, who built the airport, who built this tourist industry here in Nashville? The people who are carpenters, the people who are bringing in their trades and their crafts from Egypt, from Iraq, from Yemen, and don't have a space here in this city to pass it on to the next generation. In 2023, when Daniel Singh opened up the Thrive application in a radical new way for the whole Metro government, I had a shimmer of hope that this could change Metro government and how it approaches communities of color who pay taxes to this government. I want to share with you today what In Mahabba applied to fund. We applied for $20,000 to fund 4 projects. Our youth art classes at Southeast Library, where I see our council member Joy Stiles sometimes on Saturdays, which we started in partnership with Creative Girls Rock in September of 2022. Our adult in Arabic sewing class for middle-aged, mostly middle-aged, Arabic-speaking women in Southeast. The revival of the Tennessee Arab newspaper, which died out when the editor passed away. We wanted to revive that. And it has an international and online presence. And lastly, the translation of a community member's novel, an anthology about moving from Egypt to New York City to Nashville. Because we were defunded very intentionally and with racist intentions, we were not able to fund many of these projects, and we are having to wait to see if there will be structural changes to Metro Arts to see if our people can apply for this funding. So this is not, let's go back to the status quo, is what I want to say. There has to be radical change through Metro Arts. This conversation intersects with every corner of Nashville, the future of Global Mall, and how Antioch envisions it. How we're done with the DEI initiatives and the disparity studies and the consulting from the library to Metro Arts to Metro Legal. We're done with the Old Boys Club dictating who gets appointed to the boards and commissions and who gets funding and who gets less funding.
Ms. Youssef, you've passed your 2 minutes.
I am asking you all to intervene on behalf of your community members, not in terms of discussions or surveys, but to intervene fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your thoughts and your feedback. As stated earlier, we are also concerned about what we're hearing from constituents. We wanted to make sure that there was a forum provided to clarify, because we also were confused as to what was happening. I think today there has been some clarifying information provided as to how we got to this point, and more importantly, how we're going to move beyond this moment that we're in right now. If you can share with us the status of the 13 contracts that weren't met. Eight.
It's 8.
Okay, new math, okay.
I
8
took my math.
contracts.
8 contracts.
The 8 contracts, the information that we don't have there. Mr. Tucker, if you could please provide the 9 questions that you have given to legal, please?
Yes, and can I make just one quick statement?
Yes, sir.
That is just part of this whole public record. The scenario that was approved the second time, called scenario 4, has a smaller amount for that would be what they're working on now, what the contracts are going out for now. It basically maintains the status quo.
The new funding that's
Yes,
about to be
what we're doing now.
distributed.
What's going out now maintains the status quo, and it cuts back on what would have been the bringing in of newer people who had not been. That's just a matter of fact.
This is the result of the second vote that was done after
Yes, which is
legal
called
asked for the
scenario
votes.
4
Okay.
in all of their documents, yes.
Okay, and one last question from me, and then I will go to you, Councilmember Ewing. Director Singh, you mentioned that you did speak prior to the audit that's been requested. You did speak with the mayor's office. You spoke with Ms. Wilson. Did you speak with the mayor directly about this audit that was
I have
requested?
not been able to get an appointment with the mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Ewing.
Thank you. I just wondered if we could see the scenarios. I
Sure.
never had an opportunity. I'd love to see what
Happy to share
what
some.
was being looked at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Gadd, did you want to ask one more question?
I do, but
Go
looks
ahead.
like
No, you go ahead.
Councilmember Vo was looking, and that's that was what was approved. I just think an update, the timeline here, I think that you sent to, or handed out is really helpful from August, but this is, the scenario 4 was at the Arts Commission, that was approved after the July meeting.
That was in August. Yeah, it was approved in the August commission meeting.
Okay, and then, Okay, and then, so all the contracts and everything we're discussing is all
Based on the
on
August
scenario
vote.
4.
Yeah.
And then, Reverend Tucker, you're talking about a larger scope of,
Yeah,
change.
well, I guess just as a matter of fact, that in what is being processed now is the large organizations are getting what they got last year
right,
at the end of the day.
after the
And
commission
that
had
the
heard,
smaller organizations, many of which got cut to 50%, and some did not get anything.
after the, and if, I went
That-
back and
that's
watched
what
that
scenario
commission,
4 is.
yeah. But
Yes.
that's the commission meeting you're referencing. I went back and watched that commission meeting of, in some of the,
August meeting,
yeah. So, yeah, well, where is that? Thank you.
Forgive me, so the large organizations are getting their full amount, but the BIPOC organizations that were added are getting 50% of what they were originally promised in the first vote?
No, I'll send you the scenarios and it'll help you see what the impact
And
of
we're
the vote
currently
is.
in scenario 4.
Scenario
But there
4.
are 3 prior scenarios.
Yeah, and let me just say this, I was just making a point with that. But, and as I think when everything comes out, you'll see now, what there is there's an increase of organizations who
Apply.
had not, who had applied, who had not before. But the lion's share of the funds that the council sends goes to the larger organizations, and that's gonna remain the same.
And you
Once-
define-
one- if we can
sorry, I was like,
Raise our
but I
hands,
just,
if we can raise our hands, it'll go a lot smoother. Councilmember Vo, because she didn't get to ask her question, and then back to Councilmember Guy.
Yeah, I just want a clarification because then, okay, if that is the current state, would the Arts Commission have to meet again? Or that's like not possible? I just want to understand what's possible and if what we're saying is if this goes through, this is the status quo and then the next funding cycle will be starting over and
FY
addressing.
'25, yeah, that would be the next funding cycle in FY '25, July of 2024 is the next one. I mean, we're opening up the applications now. The other thing that we've changed at Metro Arts, till I got here, we would just get the funding from the mayor's office and council and then divvy it up. We moved it up a little earlier last year, but we didn't get it early enough to impact budget, so now we've moved it up even sooner. Our grants are open. Please let your constituents know if you have newsletters. Our Operating and Thrive Service Awards are open. They stay open till January 19th. We hope to have accurate predictions for budget so that they cannot say they didn't know, right? Like, so we'll give them, we'll do a technical review and we'll give them the actual applications that are in hand by January 19th. That's why we moved them up. We understand that's a time pressure on artists to work through it during the holidays, but we're getting closer to the alignment of the state arts council. They also have it open around the same time to inform the state's budget cycle, so that when discussions start, we have actual applications in hand for the projections.
And if I could, Commissioner Cheek, when these votes took place, what was the difference between the first vote and the second vote?
So at the first vote, I actually raised the question about the legality of our vote, because we were looking at a sheet that was breaking up the impact of the different categories based on race. And the Supreme Court had just released a decision that said it is unconstitutional to base a decision like that on race. And so I asked our legal counsel if she had a problem with that, and she said she had not had enough time to analyze that issue. I understand Metro Legal analyzed the issue and decided that my concern was they shared the same concern because it was a change in the law. Previously, you could look at race as one of the factors when you were looking at making a decision that involved government funding. And after that decision, it's not permitted. It's unconstitutional in this country. And whether you like the decision or don't like it, I don't like the decision. But whether you like it or not, it's the law of the land, and so we're supposed to follow it. So after Metro Legal came back, I think some of the arts commissioners had thought about the impact of shifting the funding from where large organizations, and by the way, large organizations is probably the wrong way to characterize it. Actors Bridge Ensemble has probably 1 or 2 staff, and dozens of actors and actresses that are not on staff that are paid, many of which are people of color, by the way. And so it's organizations versus individual artists. And I think some of the commissioners thought about the impact of changing funding in a mid-year cycle for these organizations because they had gotten used to getting the funding and they were being cut from it. And so I know I heard from some people, I know other arts commissioners heard from people in the community, because that's our job, is to listen the same way that you guys do. And I believe that's the reason that you saw people change their vote. That's my own personal opinion. I can't speak for the entire commission. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you very much.
Sure.
I'm very glad that you're here so we can actually get a commissioner perspective in addition to hearing from Director Singh. Are there any other council members that have questions? You or Councilmember Gad?
I think I've got a couple of questions I can follow up with just
Sure.
by email that I think
That'd
will
be
be easy to respond. It'll be just what the definition, when you talk about large organizations, what that means, which,
Sure.
the priorities and things like that. But that will also be a part of the scenarios. I'm sure that'll be described there as well, so I can get that at a later time, if you don't
Okay.
mind, Director Singh.
Yes,
Excellent.
of
That'd be
course.
perfect.
Councilmember Vo?
Yeah, I just had a point because I remember when you were discussing in a previous meeting, you said that when you removed the BIPOC, it didn't change the scenario. So can y'all clarify that? Because one is saying that by taking that out, it changed people's votes. But then when you were discussing, you said by taking it out, it actually did not change the makeup. So for me, that's a lot of confusion that is not clear for people who don't read the law every day, don't understand, because what I'm hearing is that we could have you took it out and there wouldn't have been a change, but I'm very confused by the second vote because if that was the case, it wouldn't have changed, but it's saying it is.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I'll respond. Commissioner Cheek is the lawyer in the room. The Supreme Court ruling was very specific to higher education, and it did not include arts. From my perspective, I'm a layman. I'm not a lawyer, but I did read the ruling, and the race was one of many factors we considered. We considered council districts, zip codes, income, first-time applicant, all of that. All of that was discussed in the grants committee meeting, and the grants committee made the recommendation to the commission. So when it came to the commission focused on just one aspect of it. So it doesn't mean that other factors were not considered. They were considered as we made the recommendations. And so we were guided by legal to say you can achieve the same result by looking at things like zip code and take race completely out of the equation. So that's what we gave as scenarios in August. And there were scenarios 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if they had picked scenario 1, we would have been able to be as close to the July vote as we had been in August. But that was not what happened. And this is where the narrative struggle is important for me. When people say just take race out and you can still achieve the same thing, maybe, but then the intent shifts, right? Because we are not naming the elephant in the room. We're sitting in the seat of civil rights movement. We're sitting in the state of volunteer state. I don't know how many of you know what the reason we've gotten the name volunteer state, because Tennessee looked for volunteers to go fight the war with Mexicans, right? We're sitting in, and to say take race out is just so out of my, I cannot understand that statement, but I followed directions again, and here we are. So, I'm sorry.
No, I'm again, that was a lot of clarification just came out just now and is on the record. So I'm grateful and appreciative for that. I'm very much looking forward to the distribution of these funds and fixing this moving forward. As we are getting ready to go into the budget season, this is a conversation that we're having. Certainly the Arts Committee is definitely having this, but I can say the council as a whole is aware of what has been transpiring, and we are going to be having conversations about the budget. As also being the chair of the Women's Caucus, I know last year we talked about giving the $2 million to arts specifically because in your plan, you had a plan for education and for having artists in schools and elementary schools, and we were supportive of that. And the Minority Caucus, of which I'm also a member, we wanted to see the funding go to BIPOC organizations So as we have this budget conversation, I just want to share that we're taking all of that into consideration. That as we vote and as we're looking for the reasons why we're voting for extra funding, when those things don't happen, that's concerning and it potentially affects whether or not things get funded. So those are things to be considerate of.
Can I just say one last thing? I was asked by the Arts Commission to give language on why we need to keep the 2 million with Metro Arts, because it funds BIPOC artists. And I wrote that language and gave it to the commissioners, and the commissioners gave that to council. And so the money went from possibly going to the Mars Building to Metro Arts. That was the vote at the end of the day. And so race was very much in that conversation. And so I feel like two priority groups were pitted against each other in that setting. And I was too new to know that. And in this instance, I wish it had gone to the Mars Building.
Interesting point of view. Thank you very much. You've given us a lot, I think, safe to say that you've given us a lot to think about. And we will receive the information that we've requested from you. And we're definitely going to have you back at the Public Facilities, Arts and Culture Committee in the next couple of months.
Thank you.
To hear the results, as well as you, Reverend Tucker. And I'd like to have you come and visit as well, Commissioner Cheek.
Thank you.
So thank you all for being here, and that concludes our meeting. Promptly at 6:30. Come on now.
Even with some chatty